Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. I never thought I'd be telling this story, yet here I am, unable to keep it bottled up. My wedding day, what should have been the happiest moment of my life, turned into a nightmare, all because of the people who were supposed to love me the most. Even now, I'm still trying to process everything that happened. 6 years ago, I thought I had found the love of my life. She was everything I wanted, intelligent, beautiful, and, I believed, loyal. After almost 2 years together, I was ready to propose. But then, one ordinary day, everything shattered. She was in the shower when she asked me to check something on her phone. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't searching for anything. But my eyes landed on a string of messages between her and my younger brother, and my stomach dropped. At first, I thought it was harmless, just playful family banter. But as I kept reading, the words twisted into a cruel revelation. They weren't just talking. They were missing each other, planning to meet, saying things no one should ever say to someone who isn't their partner. When she stepped out of the shower, I confronted her. She tried to gaslight me, calling me paranoid, denying everything. But when I held up her own messages, she broke down. The truth spilled out. She and my brother had been having an affair for months. The betrayal crushed me. The woman I loved and the brother I had trusted all my life, together behind my back. I ended it with her on the spot. And my brother? He actually had the audacity to defend himself. He said they had fallen in love, like that somehow made it okay. I told him he was dead to me. And my parents? Surely they would stand by me. Surely they would see the unforgivable betrayal for what it was. But no. Instead of supporting me, they begged me to forgive him. They were disappointed, but insisted that family is family. I cut them all off. My brother. My parents. Everyone who defended them. It was hard, but I focused on rebuilding my life. Therapy, work, anything to move forward. Then 2 years ago I met her, my now wife. She was kind, patient, and nothing like my ex. She knew my story, my family's betrayal, and never once pressured me to reconnect with them. With her, I finally felt whole again. When I proposed, I knew I had found my true happiness. As we planned our wedding, one thing was certain. My parents and my brother were not invited. They were not part of my life anymore. Still, I informed my parents not to include them but to avoid any drama. I made it crystal clear they were not welcome. Of course, they tried to change my mind. My father gave me lectures about family. My mother cried. But I stood my ground. On the day of the wedding, everything was perfect. My bride was breathtaking, our friends surrounded us, and I finally felt at peace. Until, just before the ceremony, my best man rushed up to me, his face pale. "They're here," he said. "Your parents. And your brother." It was like a punch to the gut. How dare they? How dare they show up after everything? Barely controlling my rage, I called my father. The moment he picked up, I spat into the phone. "What the hell do you think you're doing? What the hell do you think you're doing?" I growled into the phone. My father's voice came through, calm as if he hadn't just crashed my wedding. "It's your wedding day," he said, as if that explained everything. "We're your family. We should be here." My hands clenched into fists. I made it clear, you weren't invited. Especially not him. 6 years have passed, my father countered. Don't you think it's time to let bygones be bygones? Your brother is sorry. He's married now. His wife is pregnant. Can't we just be a family again? I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Did they really think they could just show up and I'd suddenly forget everything? That I'd pretend the betrayal never happened? "Get out," I said, my voice ice cold. "All of you. Leave now or I'll have security remove you." "Don't be dramatic," my father scoffed. "We're already here. Just let us stay for the ceremony. For your mother's sake, if nothing else." I was seconds away from exploding when I felt a hand on my arm. My wife. She had overheard enough to know something was wrong. "What's going on?" she asked, concern written all over her face. I told her, expecting her to be just as furious as I was. But, in true form, she was the rational one. "Let them stay for the ceremony," she said gently. "It's not worth causing a scene and ruining our day. We don't have to interact with them. After the ceremony, they can leave." I didn't like it. Not one bit. But I understood her point. This was our day. Not theirs. I didn't want their drama staining the memory of it. So, against every instinct screaming at me to throw them out, I agreed. The ceremony went on as planned. I tried to focus on my wife, on our vows, on the life we were starting together. But I was hyper-aware of them. My father, sitting stiffly with a forced smile. My mother, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. My brother, looking uncomfortable. His wife, pregnant, sitting beside him. After the ceremony, while everyone was celebrating, I saw my parents approaching. My body tensed. I was ready for another confrontation. But my best man stepped in before they could reach me. He reminded them of the deal, ceremony only. Now they had to leave. I watched the silent argument unfold. My father's stern expression. My mother's desperate gestures. My brother looking like he wanted to disappear. Finally they turned and left. My brother and his wife trailing behind. I let out a breath, convinced the worst was over. Then came the speeches. My best man stood first, giving a heartfelt toast about our friendship. Others followed with warm wishes and funny stories. And then, something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the champagne. Maybe it was the years of buried anger. Maybe it was the fact that my family had dared to show up after everything. I stood up, glass in hand. I hadn't planned a speech. My wife gave me a puzzled look as if to ask, "What are you doing?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. I turned toward my brother, who was lingering near the exit with my parents. His face froze. Keeping my voice steady, I said, "There's someone I want to thank tonight." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some guests, the ones who knew the history, stiffened. Others simply thought I was being gracious. I continued, "My brother isn't really here tonight. But I'd like to thank him anyway. Because if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be standing here with the love of my life." I paused. Took a slow sip of champagne. Let the words sink in. My father and brother, who had been mid-step toward the door, froze. Their faces twisted with uncertainty. Was this a truce? An olive branch? I let them wonder. Then, with venom in my voice, I said, 6 years ago, my brother did me a huge favor. He showed me exactly the kind of person he is, by having an affair with my girlfriend." The room went silent. I could feel the discomfort thick in the air, see the stunned expressions. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. "That betrayal taught me a lot," I continued, my voice cold. "It taught me that the people you trust the most can hurt you the deepest. It taught me that family doesn't always mean loyalty or love." I turned, meeting my wife's eyes. There was worry there, a silent plea for me to stop. But I was too far gone. "And most importantly," I said, lifting my glass toward my brother, "it set me on the path that led me here, to the best decision of my life." I let the words hang in the air before adding, "So, thank you, brother. Thank you for showing me what true betrayal looks like. Thank you for proving that blood isn't always thicker than water. And most of all, thank you for being such a monumental screw-up that it made me work on myself. Because of you, I became a better person." I took a sip. The glass shook slightly in my hand. My brother's face had gone pale. His wife sat frozen, her hands cradling her pregnant belly, eyes darting nervously between us. My father's jaw was clenched so tightly I thought he might break a tooth. My mother looked like she might faint. No one spoke. No one dared. And then, someone started clapping. It was my best man. Then another friend. Then another. And before I knew it, the entire room erupted into cheers. My father grabbed my brother by the arm and stormed out, my mother trailing after them. The door shut behind them. For the first time all day I felt free. I turned to my wife, expecting her to be upset. Instead, she just shook her head with an exasperated smile. "You really couldn't help yourself, could you?" she murmured. I grinned. "Nope." Then I kissed her. And just like that, the wedding, the real wedding, finally began. But something told me, the drama wasn't over yet. As I set my empty champagne glass down on the table, the silence in the room was deafening. I had expected a reaction, but the weight of what I had just done was finally sinking in. My brother's wife sat frozen in shock, her gaze shifting from me to the man she had married, the man who couldn't even lift his eyes from the floor. My parents looked as if they'd been slapped, their faces pale with a mix of humiliation and disbelief. "Oh, and Mom and Dad," I added, my voice steady but sharp, "thanks for showing up uninvited and bringing him along. It gave me the perfect opportunity to let everyone know exactly what kind of family I come from." The words hung in the air for only a moment before my brother's wife abruptly stood, her chair scraping against the floor. Without a word, she grabbed my brother's arm and practically dragged him out of the venue. My parents followed, my mother in tears, my father's face red with either anger or shame, I couldn't tell. And just like that they were gone. The door shut behind them and I felt a weight lift from my chest. But as I turned to face the stunned crowd, another weight settled in its place. one I hadn't anticipated. Whispers rippled through the room. I could hear my name passing from one hushed conversation to another. The mood had shifted. I had said my piece, but at what cost? It was my wife who broke the tension first. She turned to the waiters and said, "I think we could all use another drink." A nervous chuckle. A few relieved sighs. Slowly, the atmosphere returned to something resembling normalcy. But when my wife pulled me aside, her face was tight with concern. "Was that really necessary?" she asked quietly. The adrenaline was still pumping through me, but now, with no one to fight, it left me feeling drained. "I'm sorry," I admitted, rubbing my face. I couldn't let them get away with showing up like that. Acting like we were all fine after everything they did." She exhaled, squeezing my hand. "I get it," she said. "I do. But today was supposed to be about us. Our future. Not your past." She was right. I knew she was right. And yet, the relief of finally saying my truth, of finally exposing them, was stronger than any guilt I felt. The rest of the reception passed in a blur. People approached me, some offering quiet support, others looking visibly uncomfortable. I tried to shift my focus back to my wife, back to celebrating, but I knew the damage was done. Later that night, when we were finally alone in our hotel room, reality settled in. I sank onto the edge of the bed, running my hands through my hair. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I ruined our wedding day." "You didn't ruin it," my wife said softly, sitting beside me. She took my hand in hers. "It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that's what matters." I turned to her, searching her face. "How did I get so lucky?" She smiled, but it faded quickly. "I love you," she said. "And I'm on your side. Always." Then, after a pause, her expression turned serious. "But what you did today, it's going to have consequences. Are you ready for that?" I hesitated, swallowing hard. "I think so," I murmured. She squeezed my hand. "We'll deal with whatever comes next together," she promised. "Always," I agreed, leaning in to kiss her. But as I lay beside her that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but wonder, what comes next? I had publicly humiliated my family. I had dragged our personal history into the spotlight. And while I felt justified, I also knew the fallout was far from over. How would this affect my wife, who had been nothing but supportive, but never asked for this drama? Would my brother's marriage survive this revelation? Would my parents ever speak to me again? I made a silent promise that night, to my wife, to myself. No more avoiding my past. No more letting my family dictate my life. It was time to focus on the future. Our future. But I had no idea just how much more drama was about to unfold. First update, the fallout begins. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs. Just 1 week after what I now call the wedding disaster, I got a phone call that stopped me in my tracks. It was my brother's wife. Her voice trembled. "I know this is out of the blue, but I need to talk to you. In person. If possible." I hesitated. "Why?" "There are things I need to know," she said. "And I think you're the only one who can give me honest answers." As soon as I hung up, I went straight to my wife, who was working in our home office. One look at my face and she knew something was wrong. I explained the situation, half expecting her to tell me to stay out of it. But, as always, she surprised me. "I think you should meet with her," she said after a moment of thought. I raised an eyebrow. "You do?" She nodded. "We can't change what's already done. But your brother's wife is innocent in all of this. She's tangled in a mess she didn't create. If you can give her some clarity, some closure, don't you think you should?" She was right. And I knew it. So I called my brother's wife back and agreed to meet her. The meeting. The next afternoon, my wife and I arrived at a quiet cafe. My stomach churned as I waited. Then she walked in. My brother's wife looked exhausted. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face drawn. And as she moved closer, I realized just how far along in her pregnancy she really was. Something inside me twisted with guilt. She sat across from us, folding her hands over her belly. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. "I need to know everything, from the beginning." So I told her. I told her how I had found the messages on my ex's phone. How I confronted them. How they claimed to have fallen in love. How my parents had urged me to forgive them. How I had cut them out of my life. She listened in silence, her expression unreadable. But I saw it, the faint tremble of her bottom lip. When I finished, she stayed quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "Are you certain? Are you positive it was him?" "Yes," I said softly. "I'm sorry, but I'm sure." Her hand instinctively moved to her stomach. She nodded, as if she already knew the answer but had hoped for a different one. Then, in a near whisper, she said, "He told me it was all a misunderstanding. That you were jealous. That you cut off your family because you couldn't stand that she chose him." Rage bubbled in my chest. Of course he had lied. She shook her head. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I'm about to have his child. How can I raise a baby with someone like this?" My wife reached out gently. "I don't have simple answers," she said. "But you're not alone. If you need help in any way, we're here." My brother's wife blinked, startled. "What? You don't even know me?" My wife simply replied, "Because it's the right thing to do. This plays out I'm doing the right thing." Wow, this whole situation is like a slow-burning family drama unfolding in real time. It seems like everything is coming to a head, and this family meeting could either be the breaking point or the start of some real healing. It's huge that your parents actually admitted they were wrong for how they handled things in the past. That's not easy for people to do, especially after so many years. It suggests that even if they didn't take your side back then, they're starting to realize the full impact of their choices. Your brother, on the other hand, seems to be spiraling. It's sad, but it also seems like he's refusing to take accountability. Instead of facing his mistakes, he's blaming you for the fallout of his own actions. That's on him, not you. I think your wife is right. You have an opportunity here. Whether the family meeting brings closure or more drama, at least you'll know you faced it head on. And you won't have to wonder what if later. You're not the same person you were 6 years ago, and you're not standing alone this time. Are you leaning towards going to the meeting, or are you still on the fence? As I stand at this crossroads, the weight of my choices settles heavily on my shoulders. The family meeting looms ahead, a confrontation years in the making, one that could either bring long overdue closure or tear open wounds that never truly healed. My brother is spiraling, my parents are finally acknowledging their mistakes, and my sister-in-law, now firm in her decision, has chosen a different path for herself and her child. And yet, despite everything, I hesitate. Is this truly my chance to face the past and finally put it behind me? Or am I walking into yet another storm, one I might not be ready for? I don't know if I'll share what happens next. But before I take this step, I have to ask, if you were in my shoes, would you go? Would you face them, knowing the truth might not set you free but could shatter everything even further? This story is a powerful reminder that the truth, no matter how painful, is always worth confronting. It teaches us that standing up for ourselves, even against family, can be one of the hardest but most necessary things we ever do. It also shows that healing isn't just about exposing the past, it's about choosing who and what we allow into our future. Sometimes we must break away from the people who hurt us, even if they share our blood. And sometimes the strongest family isn't the one we're born into, but the one we build with those who truly stand by us. If this story resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced a difficult truth in your own life? And if you believe in standing up for yourself and choosing honesty over silence, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to show your love and support. Your voice matters. Let's keep this conversation going.